In 1867, one of the most bizarre trade deals in history was offered just before the Russian Empire sold its far-flung eastern territory of Alaska to the United States. It was offered and almost purchased by a country that is nearly 11,000 times smaller than Alaska itself, almost on the exact opposite side of the globe, and is one of only two doubly landlocked nations, meaning every nation it borders is also landlocked. Of course, that nation is the tiny Alpine principality of Liechtenstein, who at the time was better known for being a boring, economically backwards, last surviving remnant of the Holy Roman Empire. Indeed, just 60 years ago, its ruling family was forced to sell off some of its prized artwork to keep the nation afloat, including Leonardo da Vinci's counterpart to the Mona Lisa. And yet today, the country competes with Monaco for being the wealthiest country on Earth at a staggering GDP per capita of $170,000, along with one of the highest standards of living in the world, and it being the only country with no external debts. You will be hard-pressed to find many other nations anywhere close to its level of prosperity. But from a glance, it's not exactly obvious how this was achieved. Its mountainous geography and lack of access to the ocean is terrible for trade and development. Its tiny population makes it hard for its manufacturers to be competitive on the global stage, and it has virtually zero natural resources worth exploiting. So how exactly did this tiny principality go from being just an isolated valley of poor farmers to being so incredibly rich? This video is sponsored by World of Tanks. Are you ready for an amazing gaming experience that's free to play? Look no further than World of Tanks, which already has over 100 million players worldwide. With over 600 tanks to choose from, including destroyers, artillery, light, medium, and heavy tanks, the possibilities are endless. Imagine rolling across open fields, climbing steep hills, sneaking through forests, and strategizing in urban and industrial zones with 40 battle arenas to choose from. The game is designed with historical accuracy in mind, delivering authentic models and vehicles that make you feel like you're inside a real tank, which you can customize and modify to create your own steel beasts ready for any challenge. So don't wait. Download World of Tanks now using the link in the description and use the code TANKMANIA during registration to receive a 7-day premium account, 250,000 credits, the premium tank Excelsior, and 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each, including the Tiger 131, Cromwell B, and T-34-85M. By the mid-19th century, against all odds, the 61-square-mile Principality of Liechtenstein had managed to maintain its nominal independence through the tumultuous events of European history. Despite the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the fall of the Confederation of the Rhine, and the formation of a unified German state, Liechtenstein remained untouched. However, the reason for this is rather uninspiring, as it was deemed just too poor and too obscure to warrant attention from surrounding powers. In fact, the ruling family of Liechtenstein didn't even visit the principality until 1842, some 123 years after acquiring the lands as a means of gaining voting rights in the Holy Roman Empire. Despite its independence, Liechtenstein was just too small to survive on its own, and later entered into a customs union with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, relying heavily on the larger economy for food and essential supplies. This had the added benefit of enticing Swiss textile manufacturers to set up in the nation, in its first signs of industrialization. Yet for the most part, progress was very slow due to its harsh geography, which made the movement of people and goods expensive. But things would ultimately get much worse before they got better. The outbreak of the First World War would see Liechtenstein not only cut off from food and supplies from a struggling Austro-Hungarian Empire, but despite its neutrality, it was lumped in together with the Central Powers, being subject to the harsh economic embargo established by the Allied powers. Food stopped coming in, seasonal work dried up abroad, and eventually, the collapse of Austria-Hungary meant the monetary system it utilized had vanished. The Swiss textile industry packed up and left, and it was now burdened with massive debt from financing the importation of food during the war from Switzerland. Already impoverished before, the people of Liechtenstein now found themselves struggling to survive in a rapidly changing world. Unable to exist economically on its own, Liechtenstein managed to enter into a customs union much the same as it had with Austria-Hungary with Switzerland. Despite the Swiss knowing full well that doing so was a bit of an economic rescue mission, the principality's small size meant it would not be that costly to do so, and ultimately stabilizing a neighbor, securing a buffer state in a strategic location, and guaranteeing that its debts owed to it would be repaid, culminated in the economic union becoming a reality. While the effect on Switzerland was small, for Liechtenstein it was massive. It attached and based its economy on the very stable Swiss franc, and it once again had access to a much larger and advanced economy, in which its people could work, buy, and/or sell to. It also allowed the nation to outsource a wide range of costly utilities and bureaucratic functions, along with then-leader Prince Johann II selling many prized family possessions to finance the country's debts. The dire situation had stabilized. Yet Liechtenstein still faced the same barriers to developing it had always had. It lacked the money, technical know-how, or significant population to industrialize the same way its neighbors had. What it needed was foreign investment. But with its geography, location, and a lack of any real incentives, the nation proved to just not be very attractive to investors. This prompted some radical new thinking and policy decisions. Along with a new constitution that gave the citizens more political power, taxes were cut to negligible levels, and 2 other laws allowed unprecedented freedoms and protections for establishing and managing companies. The function was to give investors the widest possible range of instruments to channel money into tax-favorable arrangements, which included domiciliary companies, which are companies registered in Liechtenstein which do no actual business in the country. In essence, foreigners could register their companies in the principality, pay a low tax to the state, but in doing so, avoid much higher taxes in their home countries. What this meant for Liechtenstein was more tax revenue for almost zero cost. Almost immediately, the number of companies doubled, and with more personal financing from Johann II, the nation took a huge economic gamble on its first hydroelectric power plant in order to fuel a new push for industrialization. And when combined with a strategic opening of the nation's second bank, which was focused on using strict banking secrecy to be a safe haven for companies which were a part of the destroyed German and Austro-Hungarian empires, Liechtenstein appeared to have crafted a potent recipe for economic growth. However, substantial improvements did not come, as a combination of the Great Depression, a massive financial scandal, a terrible flood, and eventually the start of World War II would derail these efforts. Yet it did bring in a huge amount of industrial technical know-how, which was utilized during the war. As a large portion of Switzerland's labor force was mobilized to stand guard in preparation for a potential invasion, a significant shortage of workers began to appear. Many manufacturers then set up in Liechtenstein to start producing more advanced and high-quality goods, including ammunition, precision tools, and engine components. While the war ravaged the economy as a whole and its citizens suffered through harsh rationing, Liechtenstein managed to stay out of conflict directly and emerged comparably unscathed compared to most of Europe. In the decades following the war, Liechtenstein would undertake one of the most spectacular economic expansions of any nation ever. To be able to break down exactly what happened, we need to understand some fundamental things unique to the nation and how they interacted with global forces. Firstly, Liechtenstein truly is tiny. While for most of history, this was a terrible trait for a nation to have, as it often meant having to spend an outrageous amount of resources on defense and/or being easily conquered, in post-World War II Europe, this was no longer an issue and now showed a lot of benefits. For example, being small means that oftentimes positive economic results have outsized positive effects. This is precisely shown by the tax revenue Liechtenstein was receiving from its domiciliary companies. While in most nations, 4,000 companies which pay little tax and do no actual business in the nation would be of little impact, as that revenue would be spread out among millions of inhabitants. In Liechtenstein's case in the 1950s, that revenue was spread among only 12,000 people. This in turn meant the nation could maintain very low income taxes while using the tax revenue from these domiciliary companies to maintain spending on necessary government functions. Another benefit of its small size was that it was the direct reason it was able to enter into a customs union with Switzerland, which allowed it to outsource many costly bureaucratic functions and thus reduced how much it was required to spend. Yet the most important thing its tiny stature allowed for was the ability to maintain an effective, efficient, and accountable government. It is simply easier to implement the right policies at the right time in a nation of just 12,000 people than it is in one with hundreds of millions. Additionally, it's easier to keep that government accountable as it's harder to conceal corruption and less profitable to be corrupt in the first place. And after a brief scare with political radicals during the war, Liechtenstein's politicians converged on their ideological positions to make sure the nation's politics stayed boring and stable. This political stability, combined with the very pro-business policies instituted 2 decades prior, unleashed a torrent of foreign capital and investment. This also coincided with the disappearance of Liechtenstein's inherent geographical disadvantage, as innovations in transportation, energy, and communications leveled the playing field. And all of these developments could not have come at a better time. With a large swath of Europe needing to be rebuilt after the war, and with the United States throwing huge amounts of resources to do so quickly under the Marshall Plan, the demand for both manufactured goods and financial services was unlike anything seen on the continent before. Liechtenstein, being more or less undamaged by the war and now equipped with industrial expertise in foreign investment, was able to quickly become an industrial powerhouse. And while the population was and still is tiny, meaning Liechtenstein could never compete with low-cost, high-quantity manufacturing, the nation could thrive in highly specialized, high-quality, and low-volume manufacturing. This started with machine components and tools, then precision instruments and dental equipment, and later pharmaceutical and advanced electrical sensors. But what truly made its manufacturing companies global leaders was that from very early in their development, they were subject to a sink or swim environment. Not only did the government never subsidize any industries, but due to the nation's tiny population, 95% of business was always going to be based on exports, meaning these companies have always been required to be internationally competitive in order to survive. Ultimately, this has led to a manufacturing sector that is known for its innovation, resilience, and efficiency. This is why today, despite its small size, Liechtenstein is able to dominate certain industries. For example, it makes 20% of the world's dentures, and your dentist's equipment are likely made in Liechtenstein. In return, this has meant high-quality and high-paying manufacturing jobs for the nation's citizens. But it wasn't just industry that powered the principality's economic miracle. It was also the rapid growth of its famed financial and banking sector, and the continued expansion of its status as a tax haven. By the 1970s, the nation's political stability, its neutrality, attachment to the Swiss monetary system, and its extremely strict banking privacy laws made it an ideal destination for very rich individuals, from CEOs to notorious drug lords, to keep, manage, and in some cases, launder their fortunes. And while a significant amount of these shady dealings did happen, most financial activity was very much legitimate, as the nation specialized in accounting, managing trusts and holding companies, and facilitating complex business structures. At the same time, the number of registered companies taking advantage of various tax avoidance schemes had ballooned to 50,000, or more than double the number of citizens. This enabled the government to keep taxes ridiculously low, all while having amazing infrastructure, education, and healthcare, and doing so with virtually zero debt. Yet when things seemed like they couldn't get any better for Liechtenstein, it would get another boost when it joined the European Free Trade Association in 1991 and both the European Economic Area and World Trade Organization in 1995. This gave Liechtenstein much broader and freer access to over 500 million people. For a nation almost entirely based on exports and financially servicing foreigners, this was the ultimate dream scenario. Quickly, the manufacturing sector outgrew the population, which caused the nation to become a net importer of labor, in which today, roughly half of the entire workforce commutes in from neighboring Austria and Switzerland. This partially explains how the nation has the highest net exports per person, which enables an astonishing 50% trade surplus. Yet it was the financial sector that really benefited from the nation becoming more globally integrated, ultimately leading to frenzied growth that would firmly cement Liechtenstein as one of, if not the richest nations in the world. But this growth did come with ever-increasing international scrutiny about its shady financial dealings. After a number of leaked documents and scandals about Liechtenstein becoming a hub for international money laundering and tax avoidance, it was placed on the OECD's blacklist, which forced the nation to eventually remove its special banking privacy laws in 2009. While this did hurt the nation's growth somewhat and temporarily shook clients' confidence, the nation remains just a very attractive location for getting legitimate banking and other financial business done. This allowed the nation to quickly recover from the negative effects. Today, Liechtenstein yields some incredible stats. This includes the second highest income and life expectancy in the world and one of the highest rankings in the Human Development Index. Its citizens have access to some of the best healthcare and education in the world, all while paying low income taxes. This has helped offset the high cost of living that is inevitable in a land-scarce, rich nation like Liechtenstein. Crime is very low, unemployment is barely above 1%, and there are constantly new opportunities for well-paying jobs in the manufacturing or financial sectors. Ultimately, Liechtenstein was able to take advantage of its unique characteristics and global economic forces to quickly move from a starving country to one of unrivaled prosperity. This was done by instituting pragmatic and well-timed free market policies, which was enabled by an effective and efficient government. While a decent amount of this was helped by luck and some shady financial practices, ultimately Liechtenstein shows us that political institutions and foresight are much more important for economic prosperity than geography and natural resources.